Are you tired of overpaying for your gold, silver, and platinum bullion coins and bars? Then visit sdbullion.com today. SD Bullion was recently named the 177th fastest growing company in the United States by Inc. magazine. This is because they offer the absolute lowest prices in the industry and follow up with over-the-top customer service. So what are you waiting for? Go to sdbullion.com today and join more than 60,000 happy investors that save money on every precious metals purchase they make.
You discussed a little bit about Trump's trade conflicts right now, and you also wrote an article about this, how really the debates about Brexit and Trump's trade conflicts and stuff really demonstrate that no one really has a good grasp of comparative advantage. Now, you learn about comparative advantage in, the first economics classes you take. Can you tell us a little bit about this and why it seems like nobody is understanding this?
Well, as to why nobody's understanding it, I honestly don't really have an answer to that question. But just comparative advantage is very, very simple. I write on economics. That is what I do. I don't go and make my own shoes. No, I go and buy my shoes because someone else makes them a lot more cheaply than I do. And not only that, but it'd be a complete waste of my time to do so. So the shoemaker has a comparative advantage over making shoes compared with me or compared with one of my friends who I could equally turn around and say, you're not doing anything at the moment. Why didn't you run me up a pair of shoes? And he's going to turn around and say, I'm sorry, but I don't know how to make a pair of shoes. That is really what comparative advantage is. Now, if you accept that, it's the basis, if you like, of the division of labor. If you accept that, then, why is it that you put a limit in terms of who you actually seek this comparative advantage from? For example, I live near a town called Exeter in the west of England, southwest of England. What's to stop me, let us say, going and buying some shoes made in London? Why not? That's my choice, if I make that choice. And it could be that the shoes are cheaper, better, whatever it is. There is a comparative advantage compared with a cobbler in Exeter, if you like. So nobody worries about that. And in America, nobody worries about the fact that you might be, let's say, living in New York City and you buy things in from, say, Idaho. Or wherever. Nobody worries about that. But why is it then that we have this problem that when it comes to buying things from abroad in another country, that we're not allowed to pursue this comparative advantage? It is to everybody's economic benefit that we do so. Yet what we have instead is nationalism, and it's nationalism that stops it. So that is what President Trump is doing. He's waving the nationalist card. When it comes to Brexit, there is so much confusion in the Remain camp. It's just, it really is pathetic. On the one hand, they're trying to protect British industry. They think that the free trade area of the EU is the best way to do it. They don't seem to mention that because we're in the free trade area, we end up paying more for our goods than we would otherwise. And here again, we come up with this problem. What actually drives an economy? Is it, do people buy things because they're more expensive, or do they buy them because they're cheaper? They buy them because they're cheaper. And if you remove the tariffs, then actually what happens is that people have got more money to spend on other things. And this was precisely what happened. If we go back to the time of Robert Peel in the 1850s, when he, as Prime Minister, and it took him a little while to do it, so I've got sympathy with our current Prime Minister in this, but he removed all tariff barriers, starting with abolishing the Corn Laws and all the rest of it. And he said quite simply, why should we as people pay more than we need for foreign goods? No reason at all. The result of that was there was an acceleration of production in the UK economy that was absolutely massive. And the UK economy was so successful because we removed all tariffs. The French did it a decade later. They became successful. But of course, protectionism starts coming back, and you've got a constant fight, if you like, against people who want the government to protect them from foreign competition. But I mean, what we've seen, New Zealand is a very good example as well, if you like, a more contemporary example. New Zealand is an agricultural economy, and they used to export an awful lot of stuff to the UK because, we were in the Commonwealth. But then when we went into the European Union, it so happened that they were unable to export to us without having to pay tariffs. So what they did was they just withdrew, if you like, from supporting their agricultural community and just let them develop markets for themselves, or reduce the amount of lamb and wool and all the rest of it that they were producing. And the result is you've now got an economy that is wholly competitive in the global sense and doing extremely well. It forced the farming community to look at alternatives. I mean, if you go out to New Zealand now, I mean, they're growing, fruit, I mean, things like avocados, which I don't think ever came from there in the first place. They found these new fruit to grow. I mean, kiwis, obviously, we know that one. What they have done is they've diversified. And the result is that you've got, and the wine industry there, excellent. So you've got, out of free markets, you have a very, very diverse agricultural economy, which would never have happened if government had continued to support agriculture. And that, I think, is the big, big lesson for today.
Now, Trump's argument, though, is that, we're being cheated by other countries. For example, China manipulating their currency so that they can export more. So what is your perspective on that? I mean,
well, it's a complete nonsense, simply because if a Chinaman comes along and offers you something at a cut price, are you going to turn around and say, no, that's not fair? What? I mean, it's complete nonsense. If the steel industry, for example, if there is overcapacity in China and they decide to dump steel, why shouldn't your manufacturers in America, I'm not talking about the steel industry, but I'm talking about downstream from that, the people who buy steel to make things, why shouldn't they benefit from low prices? No reason at all. But we've got nationalism, and we have got steel companies, we've got steel foundries who will lobby to restrict these foreign imports and to put tariffs on them. It really is not the business of government to decide what you and I pay for our goods. It really isn't. And that is the thing that basically should be stopped.
Right. And I've also heard the argument that there's this fear, that, for example, if China keeps dumping cheap goods on the American market, that'll push the price down and cause companies to go out of business, and then China will have a monopoly on some of these products. What is your perspective on that?
Well, again, we come back to this, law of comparative advantage. Why shouldn't, why shouldn't you buy toys or whatever it is for your children made in China if it is cheaper? It's your choice as an individual. I think one of the things that is, if you like, a mistake that people make is they think that because China is manufacturing and able to sell things more cheaply to Americans than Americans can make themselves, that is the cause of the trade deficit with China. It's not the case. The reason that you have a trade deficit is actually a trade deficit with the rest of the world, and that is because of monetary policy on the one hand, the expansion of credit, and fiscal policy where your government is running a massive budget deficit. It is the balance of those things that makes up the surplus or deficit between America and the rest of the world. And it so happens that the most competitive of the countries that export to America is China. And that is why so much of the trade deficit is with China. It is because They are producing things that ordinary Americans want. But if you want to sort out the trade imbalance, then you have to look at yourselves, not at the Chinese, in order to do so.
That's really interesting. It's so often, as you talk about that, it's blamed on China, but really, as you're saying, the United States has to do some soul searching itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's fascinating. And I discovered the other day that the Chinese now own Volvo, which is a European car manufacturer, which has always been a bit of a premium brand, I suppose. And one of my sons bought a Volvo. He bought a top-end hybrid Volvo because the tax situation works favorably. That's another distortion the government puts in. Anyway, we'll pass over that bit. But the technology in this is absolutely staggering. Now, that is a Chinese-owned manufacturing entity exporting its cars into other countries. I mean, he bought this car because it was something that he needed for business and all the rest of it. And it's got so much artificial intelligence in it. If you're sort of reversing out of your gate, it'll tell you if there's anything coming from left or right if you can't see, because reversing, by definition, you can't see. It will, you've got a sort of bird's eye view of where you are in terms of obstacles and all the rest of it if you're trying to negotiate a small space. And not only that, but when you get on the motorway, or you call it the freeway, it'll stick to the lane discipline. The cameras show, it just steers itself. It is quite remarkable. Now, that's Chinese owned. Should we ban them, do you think? I mean, this is, let's ask ourselves this question. Why should the Chinese sell us motor cars like that?
No, yeah, it seems like if they're making better products, we should definitely buy from them.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, Alasdair MacLeod, it's really been a pleasure to have you on today. Before we let you go, did you want to share with the viewers any last thoughts you had and where they can find you online?
Well, you can find me at goldmoney.com. And if you go onto the landing page, hit the research tab, and under there's insights, and I write an insight article which is published sort of, I suppose, midday to late afternoon EST on Thursdays, and I also do a market report around about the same time but on Friday, and that's another weekly thing. So that's where you'll find me.
All right, once again, thank you so much for your time today.
That was my pleasure.